Good morning, Kaviba, and welcome to our Facebook Live learning session. For today's discussion, our topic would be on a basic guide to identifying and helping people with learning disabilities. Before we begin, take note of the following reminders. Make sure you are registered to the webinar to have your e-certificate of participation. Visit certificate.vibalgroup.com to generate your proof of attendance. Place your questions on the comment box allotted during the session, and they will be addressed by our speaker later on. Share the video using hashtag LearnAsOnePH as our official hashtag to our Vibal webinars. Experience learning, Kavibal. And now, to proceed with our session this morning, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our distinguished speaker. He finished his bachelor's degree in psychology at Colegio de San Juan de Letran, Manila, and his master's and doctorate degrees in clinical psychology at the University of Santo Tomas Graduate School. Currently, he is a full-time professor at the UST Psychology Department. He was once affiliated with the psychology programs of Letran Manila and FEU. A first batch PRC licensed psychologist and a Psychological Association of the Philippines PAP certified specialist in clinical and assessment psychology. He has been an academic clinician and practicing psychologist since 2003. Currently, a PAP board member and the PAP vice president. He has been actively involved in PAP since 1990 as junior affiliate, associate member, and now a regular member. He is also a lifetime member of the Philippine Mental Health Association Incorporated. His research interests and advocacy includes suicidology, LGBT psychology, positive psychology, and children with special needs. He is also the program and evaluation consultant and incorporator of Parents in Child Development and Progress Incorporated, a volunteer psychologist of Ang Komunidad para sa Ikauunlad ng Tao, the Community for Human Development, and an advocate member of Buhay Movement. Apart from his psychological endeavors, he is also involved with theater, with Teatro Tomasino, and a yoga practitioner at Urban Ashram, Manila. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our speaker for this morning, Dr. Marc Eric S. Reyes, RPM, RSI, CSCLP, CSAP.
Okay, good morning. Good morning, Kiana. Good morning, Michelle. And good morning to the audience of this webinar from Vibal. Okay, so I will start sharing my screen now. Okay, So let's begin. Okay, so I prepared my slides, okay, and my topic to give you an overview, or a very basic guide on how you could identify and help people with learning disabilities, so particularly students, okay, so children and hopefully adolescents. So okay, take note that these are just warning signs, so these are not diagnostic. So it will just give you red flags or things to look into rather, okay, on how you could identify them in your classroom, okay, or even at home for parents, okay. And of course, later on, I would be recommending them for formal assessment and evaluation. So, isipin na lang natin, ano to, LD warning signs for dummies. Okay, so dummies meaning, okay, not as a derogatory remark, but like a simple guide for all of us. Okay, so we all have ideas of probably what LD is. So I do hope, okay, I could clarify, okay, what learning disability or learning disorder is. Okay, so what are learning disabilities? Okay, so let's try to identify and operationalize, okay, the term LD. Okay? So when we speak of learning disabilities, okay, these are conditions, okay, which could affect, okay, one or more individuals, okay, and it affects their basic physiological processes. So again, take note, okay, their basic physiological processes, okay, in a sense that it affects how they understand or use language. Okay? So you have to understand that LD is a real, okay, disorder. It's a real condition, okay, and it affects our brain's ability to receive, process, store, respond to, and communicate information. So technically, it's a brain-based condition. Okay, so I think that is what you have to always remember or bear in mind. Okay, it is not simply an attitudinal problem. Okay, it is a brain condition. Okay, so their brain is wired differently. Don't also think of it like a brain disorder or a very severe organic brain syndrome. Okay, it means that their brain is functioning differently. I'll explain further later on. So again, okay, their brain's ability to receive, process, and store and communicate information is quite different, okay, compared to other kids or other individuals. Okay? So, learning disabilities, are not the same as intellectual disability. Okay? So that this is the new term that you always have to remember. Intellectual disability is the new term, formerly known as mental retardation. So we don't use anymore MR, mental retardation, okay, as a term to describe, okay, those who have intellectual disabilities. Okay? So LD is different from ID, and it's also different from sensory impairment. So those who have a visual impairment or hearing impairment, the blind and the deaf, and for those in the spectrum of autism. So LD again is not the same with ID. Okay? So again, why is it not the same with intellectual disability? Because LD individuals have average or above average intelligence. Okay? So for those of who are intellectually disabled, okay, or again, most of you would refer it to as mental retardation, okay, their IQ is quite low. Okay? So it's actually below average. Okay? But for those with LD, surprisingly, okay, why are they not performing in school when in fact their intellectual ability or their mental ability, their intelligence is average, and most of them are even above average. So despite the fact that they have average or above average intelligence, these individuals struggle. So again, take note, they are struggling even though they have the ability. Okay? So they're struggling to acquire skills that eventually affect their performance in school, even at home, and even in the community, and even in the workplace. Okay? Why? Because, okay, LD is a lifelong condition. So it is important to understand that when we speak of learning disability or learning disorder, LD is defined differently by different individuals. Okay? So the general public would always have an impression, ay naiintindihan ko kung ano yung LD, ano yung konsepto ng LD kasi again, sorry for the term, pero kada ay bobo yan, mahina yan sa school. Ganun yung madalas na konsepto natin of LD. But again, it's a misnomer, mali po yun. Okay? Hindi sila bobo, hindi sila mahina because again, as I've mentioned, they have average to above average mental ability. Okay? But of course, the concept of LD is different for professionals, okay? Like psychologists, okay? Pediatricians. Okay? So I'm offering you now different definitions of how professional groups, okay, would describe what LD is. Okay? So we all have learning strengths and weaknesses. Ha? Lahat tayo may kahinaan sa pag-aaral. Okay? And that is very common. That is very natural for us to have strengths in certain subjects, and then we have weakness in certain subjects. But it is totally different for those with LD. Why? Because our difficulty may be because we don't understand it or it's not our thing. Hindi ko gusto ang math. Hindi ko gusto ang English, kaya medyo weak ko yan, Waterloo ko yan. But for those with LD, the reason why they have weaknesses is because of neurological reasons. Okay? So students with LD may have difficulty in the learning process. So again, ang problema nila, hindi yung intellectual ability, hindi yung capacity nila para matuto. Kung hindi, hirap silang matuto kasi yung proseso ng pagtuto ang nahihirapan sila. Bakit? Because they have difficulty listening, they have difficulty in terms of time management, reading, writing, or mathematical reasoning. Now, isipin, so bakit sila nagkakaroon ng ganong difficulty? Because their brain is wired differently. Okay? So during the prenatal development, probably, or there is a genetic factor in the family, okay, their brain is wired differently. So isipin nyo na lang, iba yung operating system nila. So kadalasan, when I speak of LD, ang gamit ko na analogy, para siyang computer. So yung computer nila, okay, yung operating system nila, naiiba sa operating system ng karaniwang individual. Okay? So kadalasan, meron silang mga applications na hindi naturally downloaded. Ika nga, di ba? Para pag bumili tayo ng laptop, meron yung basic operating system. So may kulang doon. Okay, ano yung bakit nagkaroon ng kulang, hindi natin alam. It could be because of genetics or it is because of a condition during prenatal development. So yung brain nila, again, hindi siya mali. Okay? Hindi siya brain disorder. Kung hindi, it is just wired differently. Okay? So meron lang ibang sistema. So kaya pwede naman natin siyang i-rewire. That's why later on, we could rewire the brain. Okay? And we could actually download to them. Pwede nating ilagay yung application na wala sila. Okay? So because their brain is wired differently, okay, this is the neurological reason why they have difficulty learning. Okay? So yung abilidad nandun kasi average to above average ang intellectual ability nila, kaya lang yung paraan kung paano sila natututo, yung learning process, dun sila hirap. Again, ang term hirap, nahihirapan sila kasi maaring may kulang na hindi na download sa brain nila during development or merong ibang wiring. Now, since this is a brain condition, it's a neurological condition, LD is a lifelong condition. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, hanggang bata to, pag na-diagnose or nalamang may LD, hanggang sa pagtanda, okay, meron sila pa ring LD. Okay? So, lifelong condition to. Kaya ang gagawin talaga, coping mechanism. Okay? So that's why sooner or later, once they are identified, steps can be taken para ma-circumvent or ma-overcome natin yung challenges, okay, of having an LD. But they will still have the LD, but they could manage already their condition if given proper management and intervention. So how will we identify now? May tatanungin nyo, paano ba namin malalaman kung yung anak namin merong LD? Okay? So sa mga magulang, kadalasan mas nalalaman natin or nakikitaan natin talaga ng significant red flags yung ating mga anak kapag nasa eskwelahan na. Pero sa bahay, maaring meron na tayong mga nakikita mga senyales at mga sintomas ng LD. But more often than not, we will brush them aside. Ay, wala yan. Baka lang hindi pa lang siya ready mag-aral or tinatamad. Kadalasan yun ang sasabi natin, tinatamad lang yan, kaya hindi siya nag-aaral. So how would we identify it? Okay. The hallmark or sign of LD, take note, is a distinct and unexplained gap between a person's level of expected achievement and their performance. Anong ibig sabihin nito? Unexplained gap kasi 'di ba? Mataas naman ang kanilang intellectual ability, yung level of intelligence nila. So pwede natin yan malaman pag binigyan sila ng mental ability test, binigyan sila ng intelligence test. So makikita mo sa resulta ng intelligence test, okay, average to above average ang kanya namang level of intelligence. So bakit siya nagfo-fall, naglalag, or nag-underachieve siya sa kanyang performance in school? So learning disabilities affect every person differently. So dapat tatandaan nyo, hindi ito one size fits all. Okay? So lahat ng ibibigay ko ngayon are general red flags, pero maaring naiiba siya sa bawat estudyante or sa bawat tao and sa bawat stage of development. So ang bata, tapos ang adolescents at ang matanda, may iba-iba yan na mga presentation ng symptoms. So it could range from mild LD to more severe LD. So again, LD is an umbrella term. It's a general term for those people having difficulties, significant difficulties learning. So from mild to severe. And it is not uncommon for people to have more than one LD. So again, later, i-identify natin marami pang specific kinds of learning disability. So students with LD are not usually recognized in the classroom. So parang, ano ba yun? Hindi natin ma-recognize sa bahay, hindi pa natin ma-recognize sa classroom. So paano siya ma-recognize? Why is it difficult to recognize or we miss out identifying students in the classroom? Is because more often than not, we teachers falsely will diagnose them as, ay naku, tamad lang, ayaw mag-aral, or lack of attention. So madalas kaya sila nami-miss out at hindi natin, na nasa harap na pala natin in the classroom, kitang-kita na natin yung red flags, pero nagkakaroon tayo ng maaring cognitive dissonance or we try to brush it off na, ay, ano lang yan, katamaran lang yan, okay? Or ang dami kasing mga distractors at hindi siya nakaka-focus. So kaya itong webinar natin will more or less give you that idea. So paano mo malalaman or paano mo makikita na ay attention problem ito or motivation problem or LD na siya, red flag for LD inside the classroom. So the only way to identify such people is really try and motivate them to pay attention. Okay? So, try to motivate and make them pay attention. Tapos kapag meron hirap pa rin mag-focus, naku, baka nga LD. So again, the only way to identify such people is to try and motivate and pay attention to whether the student have trouble focusing or can't seem to focus on certain activities. Okay? So, but again, this is a challenge with 35 to 50 kids inside the classroom. I understand yung mga guru natin dito, no, challenging. Kasi lalo na pag ang dami-daming mga estudyante sa classroom. So, paano natin ma-identify? So, later on, I could also give you tips on how to help you. So, although all classes are not going to have learning disabilities, the best way is to pay attention to students who can't seem to focus. So kapag may estudyante tayo na hindi nakaka-focus, medyo, red flag na. Bakit hindi siya makafocus sa klase? Palagi siyang distracted. Okay? So medyo one identification na yon, lack of focus and lack of attention or easily distracted. Tapos dun tayo aalamin pa, ano pa yung iba pang simptomas. Kasi pwede naman yon dyslexia, which is a specific LD, or it could be ADHD. Okay? So pasensya, baka biglang nako-complicate ko na, ang dami na. So kanina sabi ni Dr. Reyes, Ang LD, hindi siya ID, intellectual disability. Ang LD, hindi rin siya sensory impairment like hearing impaired or visually impaired. Ang LD, hindi rin autism spectrum disorder. Pero, ang LD, kadalasan overlaps with ADHD. Again, ang ADHD po hindi simpleng kalikutan ha. So isa rin 'yon. Pag hyper ang bata, malikot, stereotype kagad natin na ADHD. Hindi po pareho 'yon. So hindi simpleng kalikutan lang ang ADHD. ADHD is also a neurological condition. Okay? So ang LD at ADHD kadalasan they share common features. So anong ibig sabihin? Kapag may ADHD, ang problem nila is focus. They have difficulty attending to tasks. Kaya nga deficit. So take note hindi siya attention-seeking behavior. Ang ADHD, hindi yan mga batang kulang sa pansin. Kasi yun madalas iniisip na, ay, attention-seeking, kulang sa pansin ng ADHD. Hindi po yon. Ang ibig sabihin ng ADHD, attention deficit, may kakulangan sila or nahihirapan silang mag-attend or mag-focus. Okay? Dahil nga, maaring may hyperactivity pa. Yung hyperactivity, yun yung kalikutan. So, pareho ang LD at ADHD na may difficulty in sustaining attention. Bakit? Because their brain easily gets distracted. Madali silang ma-distract sa mga paligid nila because their brain is very sensitive to sensory stimulus. So ano ngayon lang ang kaibahan? Hindi lahat ng LD may ADHD. Maaring LD lang yung meron sila. Pero karamihan ng may ADHD, meron ding LD. Why? Because attention is a major problem of ADHD. So those with ADHD will often have a learning problem or a learning difficulty. So parang kalakip na yan ng ADHD. Once a child or a person has ADHD, that person will always be challenged in the learning process. Okay? So it's like an automatic thing. Okay? But, pwedeng mild learning problem lang. Or it could be a diagnosed LD na. So pwede yon, tinatawag natin comorbidity or magkasama. So ADHD, maaring meron rin kasamang learning disability. But some naman, hindi ganun kalala yung learning problem nila. So ADHD with learning difficulties lang or learning problem. But it is not as severe para mawarrant na may diagnosis na LD. Okay? Pero hindi lahat ng LD may ADHD. Okay? So, sana malinaw yon. Karamihan ng may ADHD, meron ding LD, pero hindi lahat ng LD may ADHD. Okay? They share common features, like difficulty in concentration, problems with memory, organizational skills, but they are not the same disorder. Okay? So, but again, madalas, napapag-confuse natin na isa siya. Okay? And kadalasan, both LD and ADHD, in the classroom, we mistaken as lazy, okay, or is associated with an emotional behavior like depression or anxiety. Okay, why? Because if a child is experiencing anxiety or depression, it could affect the learning process. So kaya kailangan natin alamin, yung isang estudyante nahihirapan mag-focus. Bakit siya nahihirapan mag-focus? Okay? So maaring malaman nyo, ay kaya nahihirapan siya mag-focus or mag-aral kasi may problema sa bahay. Okay? So anxious yung bata, depressed yung bata. So maaring kaya siya nahihirapan mag-focus is not because of LD, but because it's associated with another condition or emotional behavior. So talagang importanteng aalamin natin. Or kadalasan naman yung mga batang nahihirapan mag-focus, hindi siya consistent. Dati okay siya, tas hindi siya naging okay. So it could be an environmental or a stressor. Pero ang LD, ever since, may difficulty na yan. So the LD person, a person with LD, take note, it will affect etong different areas ng ability. Okay? The neurological process or the neurological problem affects their listening skill, their speaking skills, reading, writing, spelling, reasoning, mathematics. Okay? So take note, it could affect all of the abilities or some of the abilities. That's why most people with LD would also have problems in speaking. Minsan may delayed language development na kasama yan. Okay? Ang kaibahan ng LD sa ID, ang intellectual disability, dahil ang problema nila, intelligence, they will have problems on all subjects. Sa lahat ng subjects sa klase, may problema ang ID. Kasi nga, ang problema niya yung kanyang ability mismo, yung kanyang intellectual ability. But ang LD, mapapansin nyo, successful sa arts and PE, pero in reading, writing, in math subjects, may problema. Pero in other subjects like creative writing or even in practical arts and physical education, wala namang problema. So these are specific characteristics of those with LDs, or these are specific warning signs. So ito yung maaring makita nyo. So the followings may, take note, may suggest the presence of a learning problem, such as difficulties in memorizing basic concepts such as the alphabet, rhyming words, associating letters with sounds, reading comprehension or even reading aloud, basic spelling, coordination, sensory processes, or even pronunciation. Okay? They also have difficulty expressing ideas verbally or even textually, yung sinusulat. Or they have difficulty expanding vocabulary. Konti yung mga words na ginagamit nila. Of course, they have difficulty understanding mathematical symbols. Hindi nagme-make sense sa kanila yung plus tsaka minus sign. Okay? Parang ano yon, alien or foreign language sa kanila yon. So understanding basic arithmetic like addition, subtraction, processes, hirap yan. Organizing ideas or completing basic tasks. Or even understanding basic conversation. May mga topics or may mga things sila during conversation na nami-miss out. Kasi nga yung listening skills are also affected. So, you have to understand, the ones that I've shown to you are characteristics that vary as well with age and with content area. Okay? So take note, the problems listed are just hints. Hints lang siya ha, hindi siya markers. So pag nakitaan nyo lang, hint lang siya. So anong gagawin nyo? You will record, and then you will monitor. Okay? And then later on, of course, refer for assessment. Okay? So it is important that you assess the importance of any particular behavior in relation to the age and the peers. So i-compare nyo rin with their age bracket. Some of the behaviors might make you suspect that a student has a learning ability. Suspect lang kasi hint lang siya. So ito yung maaring tignan nyo. Okay? So yung mga guru dito, okay, mga magulang na mga anak nyo nasa preschool, ito more or less yun namang mga hints na pwede nyong tignan. Does the child have difficulty or delayed in development? Learning the alphabet, rhyming words, connecting sounds with letters, yung mga phonemes, yung counting and learning numbers. Okay? Ayan, simple dressing up. Okay? Kasi yung ano yan yung fine motor and gross motor ability. So make sure also being understood when he or she speaks to a stranger, kasi baka yung pananalitan ng bata naiintindihan lang sa bahay, pero ang mga stranger hindi nila naiintindihan paano siya magsalita. Ayan, the use of scissors, crayons, and paints is very important kasi yung dexterity para makita nyo yung fine motor ability, kasi mamaya it will affect din yung kanilang pencil grip. Okay? So, paghawak ng kubyertos, yan, titignan nyo yan kasi yung fine motor ability. Ang sinasabi, ang very basic niyan, sa paghawak ng pencil, yung tripod, dapat 3 daliri lang yung ginagamit pag humahawak ng pencil. Okay? So, dapat tripod lang. So, kung nakikita nyo, 3 daliri lang yung dapat na humahawak ng pen. Okay? Tapos yung 2 daliri dapat at rest siya. Pero meron tayong nakikita ganyan humawak ng pencil, 'di ba, or pen. Okay? So wrong wrong dexterity or holding of the pencil or the pen. Dapat tripod siya, 3 lang. Okay? So pwede niyo yang i-practice sa bata. Pwede kayong mag-fold ng tissue paper tapos palagay niyo dito. Okay? So parang yan. Pwede kayong kumuha ng piece of paper para ma-train niyo yung bata. Okay? So get a piece of paper. Okay? You could fold it in small. fold. Okay? Tapos, pahawak nyo dito, di ba? Yan. Tapos, hahawakan niya yung pencil. So, dapat yung papel hindi nawawala, hindi natatanggal. So, to train, bata pa lang, to train the brain, okay, na ang ginagamit lang niya pang hawak ng pencil. So, tignan nyo, di ba, hindi ko nabibitawan yung papel. Kasi ito dapat talagang at ano siya, naka-fold siya dapat yung dalawang daliri. Okay? So at rest siya, syempre pag walang papel at rest. Pero para matrain nyo yung brain, matrain nyo yung dexterity, okay, get a piece of paper, kahit tissue paper or yan, post-it, pahawakan nyo. So palagi lang niyang hawak. Tapos hawak niya yung pen. Okay? So yan. So this is properly training. You could train already sa paghawak, tamang paghawak ng crayons, paghawak ng pen, pencil, yan. So meron naman ngayon nabibili pencil grips. Okay? Kasi may mga bata na hirap silang mag-grip ng pencil. So pwede naman kayong bumili ng pencil grip para maturuan mag-tripod yung bata. Or kung hindi naman, pwedeng lagyan nyo ng clay, okay, o kaya foam para nahawakan niya. Okay. So yun. Then of course, okay, you could read through, react too much or too little to touch, using words or letter stringing, yan, pronouncing words. So ito yung mga difficulties sa preschool. Sa elementary, okay, tignan nyo, does the child have difficulty reading accurately, learning vocabulary, or already speaking in full sentences? Okay? Moving from one activity to another, so dapat nakaka-shift sila. Okay? Well, without difficulty. They could already express their thoughts verbally. Okay? Extemporaneously or even in writing. And again, ayan, sa elementary, dapat wala nang problem on holding the pencil. Siyempre sa preschool, meron pa. Kaya doon pa lang natin sila pwedeng turuan ng pencil grip, di ba? Pero dapat pagdating ng elementary, wala nang difficulty in holding the pencil. So pag may difficulty siya in holding the pencil, it could be a hint of a problem. Okay? So mapapansin niyo yung problem ng holding a pencil kapag madaling mapagod yung bata sa paghawak ng pencil. Wala siya sa legibility ha. So minsan tama yung pencil grip pero pangit magsulat. So hindi 'yon. So pansin niyo rin madaling mapagod yung bata pag hawak ng pencil or namumuti. Kasi sobrang stress yung daliri sa paghawak ng pencil. So namumuti yung dulo. So they have difficulty, ibig sabihin, holding the pencil. And that will affect writing letters and numerals by hand. And that is why it is encouraged, elementary, you teach kids still what we call cursive writing. Nung panahon ko, longhand ang tawag dyan. So cursive writing. So malaki yung importansya ng cursive writing. Kasi ngayon, I notice a lot of kids sanay sila sa print. Okay, but the best writing still is for them to learn about cursive writing. Okay, tapos computing math problems is a difficulty in elementary, following directions, and remembering routines. Take note, LD may have problems with memory. So that's why remembering routines and organizing is a difficulty for them. For adolescents and adulthood, kadalasan it's hard already to identify. Bakit? Because most of them have already developed on their own coping strategy. So, natatakpan na siya na hindi natin napapansin na may LD. Okay? And that's why I'm telling this is because most of us miss it out in college. Kasi sinasabi ay dapat pang elementary, high school, or senior high lang ang pag-identify ng red flags ng LD. Hindi po. Okay? Experience has it that there are students late na identify. Okay, later on, I'll probably in the sharing, I'll provide some anecdotes or experience that I've had. Okay, ako mismo, okay, na-experience ko na-miss out ko sa isang estudyante na meron pala siyang dyslexia nung estudyante ko siya in college. So in adolescence, in adulthood, dapat wag nating kalimutan as tertiary educators, we should also still look for hints. Okay? Or even in the job, mga bosses, dapat kita rin natin maari. So, does the individual have difficulty remembering newly learned information, staying organized, understanding what he or she read, getting along with peers and co-workers, Finding or keeping a job, ha, yung palipat-lipat ng trabaho. Okay, understanding jokes that are subtle or sarcastic or making inappropriate remarks. Expressing thoughts verbally or in writing. Even as adolescent, they have difficulty. They have difficulty following directions. Madalas nawawala. Okay? Okay? Or difficulty in basic skills, di ba? Adolescent or adult na, but reading, writing, spelling, in the basic R, reading, writing, arithmetic, is very, very problematic when in fact dapat learn skill na siya. And of course, proper use of grammar or written communication in adolescent and adulthood. Okay? So these are just hints. Okay? So what are the qualifiers? Although the contents of the list that I mentioned indicate learning difficulty, take note, it could be a learning difficulty but not a learning disability. Okay? Again, it could be a learning difficulty or a learning problem, but it does not necessarily qualify to become a learning disability or a learning disorder. Okay? So, hindi yon. So, anong dapat tignan? Anyone, again, may exhibit all of these characteristics in one point of our lives. So on occasion, we have difficulty reading kasi anxious tayo. Pero ang lumalabas dito sa mga hints na to, very, very consistent. So kung nakita nyo siya ng adult, mapapansin nyo pag sinabi niya, ay bata pa lang, meron na siya. So ibig sabihin, present na siya, bata pa. So for children naman, consistent on every setting. Okay? So, take note, the keyword for the qualifier is unexplained. Hindi natin alam bakit. Kasi kung sinasabi natin, ay, because of anxiety, because of an emotional problem, stressor in the house, yan. Explained yon. So, if it's unexplained, okay, consistent, and very unusual, okay, lalo na yung writing style or yung reading behavior niya, very, very unusual, and there's discrepancy. Okay? Again, yung discrepancy, okay, intelligence test will reveal average above average intelligence. So may discrepancy. Bakit? Kasi nandun yung innate potential and ability, pero bakit hindi, okay, hindi siya makakuha ng good performance in school or nahihirapan siya. Okay? So, you have to look into this. Okay? So, qualifiers, anong task yung involved dun sa nahihirapan? So, aalamin nyo sa ang task ba siya nahihirapan. So, you have to identify the task that is involved, why the child or the person is having difficulty. Next, in what sort of environment is the problem observed? Kasi yon, okay? Pag nag-usap-usap yan minsan sa faculty room, doon kayo magugulat. Bakit siya nahihirapan sa reading class, sa math class, pero sa arts class or sa PE, hindi? Okay? So bakit in certain courses, in certain subjects, the child is doing well while in the other subjects, hindi? Okay? So what instructions was provided to the students about how to accomplish the task? Okay, pansin nyo kapag verbal instructions lang, hirap siya. Pero kapag may visual ang instruction or merong practice or may step-by-step procedure, nadadalian siya. Okay? So note which instructional situations are problematic, okay, together with an indication at to which methods or approaches are most successful with that student. So take note, teachers should really observe, okay, the student's performance, unique performance in class. And also ask other teachers in other classes if they are also that way in their classroom. Or you could also ask the parents at home, okay, how are they at home? So para makita niyo yung consistency. And then anecdotal records, you have to record your observations, okay? So that later on, may babalikan kayong record when you discuss this later on for assessment and evaluation. Okay? So, again, no, you might think, ay, too much naman for teachers to do. Okay? But again, this is the best way for you to qualify if you have a student who needs a special attention, okay, or special instructional materials or methodologies in the classroom. So if someone is concerned about a student, okay, he should discuss his observations with appropriate school personnel. So pag may napapansin na kayo, okay, again, hindi nyo naman yung sasarilihin. Okay, record it and then discuss your observation with appropriate school personnel. So sino yung appropriate school personnel? It could be your department chair, your dean, your principal, okay? And also, you could discuss it with the guidance office, with the counseling office, okay? So a careful and thorough review of concerns with input from multiple sources, as I mentioned, ask parents, other educators, yan. You could consult physicians, psychologists, so referral system na. Speech and language, and of course, okay, yung tao mismo. Okay, you could talk to the student. Okay, ano yung difficulty niya? Bakit hirap siyang magbasa? Okay? Bakit hirap siyang mag-add or mag-subtract? Okay? Without, of course, antagonizing students. Some students, okay, will not reveal their difficulty kasi nahihiya. Kasi nga, okay, they have an impression na bobo sila or mahina sila. Okay? So, yung discrepancy na sinasabi ko kanina, it is worsened by anxiety and depression. Yung gap, nagkakaroon ng tinatawag na frustration gap. So may gap na, 'di ba, yung kanilang intellectual ability na mataas, tapos yung kanilang school performance na mababa, meron na siyang gap. Okay? Tumataas yung gap na 'yon, kapag nadadagdagan sila ng frustration, anxiety and depression. Yung kahit kasi anong gawin nilang sikap nila, bakit hindi nila mapag-aralan? So na-frustrate yung bata. Tapos kadalasan, the words that we use in calling their attention adds to the frustration. Okay? So, you have to really look into multiple sources and consult with different experts para ma-rule in and ma-rule out nyo the presence of LD. Okay? And, so yung palang yung general presence of LD. LD have different kinds pa. Okay? Ito yung different kinds. Okay? Dyslexia, or we call it learning, reading disability, dyscalculia or mathematics problem or mathematical disability, dysgraphia, problem in writing, and dyspraxia, problem in motor skills. So yung dysgraphia is more on fine motor, tapos yung dyspraxia is more on gross motor. So these are common signs din uli. So again, you could find resources naman or there are books that you could look into, but this is just giving you common signs of dyslexia or a reading problem. Okay? So I'll just read out quickly lang. Difficulty determining meaning, okay? Difficulty learning to recognize written words, difficulty reading single words, or such as word in a flashcard, difficulty learning the connection between letters and sounds, confusing words such as at and to, reverses letters, soiled sa solid, left and felt, the and ba. So yung D or B na babaliktad nila. Reversal rin of the word tip, ang basa nila pit kasi nagkakaroon ng reversal ng letters. It avoids reading aloud. Why? Because they are slow readers and then they are laughed at when they're reading aloud. And even writing composition because spelling becomes a problem. Okay? For dyscalculia, for mathematical problems, difficulty reading and writing numbers. Again, the symbols plus, minus, division symbols, for them it does not make sense. Okay? Sometimes nasasagot nila 3 plus 2, pero pag binaliktad mo na 2 plus 3, hindi nila masagot. Hindi nila ma-decipher na pareho lang yon, binaliktad mo lang yung number sequence. So they could answer 3 plus 2, pero 2 plus 3 hindi nila masagot. They have difficulty. Okay? So poor arithmetic skills. Hindi ito calculus or statistics, yung basic arithmetic of addition and subtraction. Okay? Pati yung positive saka negative sign of symbols, hindi nagme-make sense sa kanila. Again, kahit anong turo nyo, parang hindi nagme-make sense. It's like a foreign language to them. Or natutunan nila ngayon, in the afternoon, nakalimutan na. Memory issues din kasi. Memory problems. So they have difficulty storing information. Kaya minsan ang magulang na-frustrate. Di ba pinag-aralan na natin to kahapon? Bakit ayan na naman? Pareho na naman ang issue mo, problema mo. Yun. So warning sign na yon na bakit niya nakakalimutan. Okay? So alignment of numbers is also difficult when they add. Di ba dapat ina-align? Okay? So inability to perform, calculate, and comprehend word problems, so yung mga problem-solving tasks. Kasi yung number, yung 1 na number sa ONE, hirap na i-associate na ONE is also one. So kapag yung numerical convert to word, they have difficulty aligning, it's just the same. Okay? Kasi sinasabi, yung may mga dyscalculia, wala raw sila nung number mode. What do I mean by number mode? Hindi na download sa brain yung operating system or yung application ng numbers. Okay? So wala, kumbaga walang Excel, parang ganon. Walang Excel na nandoon na download sa operating system. So they have difficulty also with currency. Kaya lifelong problem ang may dyscalculia, even it work. So they have difficulty balancing their checkbook, okay? Buying things, yan. Hirap din sila mag-identify ng sizes, small, medium, large. Hirap sila. Again, they have difficulty. Acquiring spatial relations is difficult. They have difficulty reading maps. So that's why if they have dyscalculia, they often get lost. Nahirapan sila, etong kaling to parallel sa kalye na to. Yung ganon. Okay? For this graph, which is writing, nasabi ko na yung pencil grip kanina. So, poor handwriting and spelling. Again, when say poor, hindi illegible ha. So, yung poor, strokes. Kaya sa cursive writing, makikita natin. So, errors in grammar as well. Okay? They have difficulty getting letters to sit on the horizontal line. So, hirap sumunod. At kapag nagsusulat sila sa blank space, hindi sila makasulat ng diretso kasi walang linya. So nasanay sila na sumusulat may linya. Yan. So margins are often ignored. Okay? Has difficulty in time learning cursive writing, as I always say. So appeal ko kasi old school ako 'di ba? Longhand pang tawag namin. Pero ngayon I notice hindi na naituturo sa mga bata yung cursive writing. So karamihan sa mga college students I notice now print sila. Okay? Yung cursive writing is very very important. In fact, if you notice, mas maraming effort sa print kasi nililift mo yung hand mo pag nagsusulat ka. Samantalang cursive writing, once pumatong na yan, dire-diretso na. You don't lift your hands, right? So less effort on cursive kasi continue siya. Ang print, di ba? You lift your hand. Okay? Yon. Okay? And then, they have difficulty cursive letters F, B, M, N, W, and U. Lalo na yung W kasi tuloy-tuloy. Di ba? U, F. Yan. So they have difficulty in that. For dyspraxia, so maaari makita to sa PE, sa playground, yan. Problem is eye-hand coordination or mga practical arts. Maaring dyan sila may problema sa practical arts naman. Yung eye-hand coordination, balance, yan. So the handedness, so wag rin natin piliitin ha kung left-handed siya, left-handed. Hayaan siya. Kasi meron tayong notion na dapat right-handed palagi. So hindi na po yun sinusunod. So dapat sundin yung handedness talaga niya. Kasi natural sa kanya yung handedness niya Kaya rin hirap no lahat ng gunting natin pang right hand, walang gunting na pang left hand. Kaya yung left-handed hirap sila humawak ng mga gunting kasi it was made for right-handed individuals. So being clumsy or bumping into objects, ayan, holding utensils, holding a cup, while drinking. So pwede nyo na yung makita yan if they have problems in dyspraxia, even at home. So difficulty doing fine motor activities like yan, tying shoelace. Kasi di ba sabi ko kanina, they have to learn how to dress themselves. So kita nyo yung botany, dyspraxia yan, fine and gross fine motor ability. Okay? So speech difficulties also could interfere. So they have speech problems. Okay? So, how can we help students? Paano na natin sila tutulungan pag nakita natin yung mga hints natin or yung mga red flags? Of course, okay, parents and teachers, you cannot diagnose them. So you have to refer. So as I mentioned, if you've seen hints already, discuss with appropriate school personnel, okay? So the dean, the principal, your department chair, your coordinator, the counseling office, and then do full assessment and then get proper diagnosis. So refer them to developmental pediatricians or reputable therapy centers. So you coordinate with specialists and then implement classroom strategies that they would recommend. Okay? So talagang ano yan it's a collaborative work. So teachers should now learn skills or strategies that is being recommended by a DepEd or a behavior therapist okay, for you to assist the child in class. So learning difficulties can be recognized and can be categorized as one of two groups, okay? So known as verbal or nonverbal difficulties, okay? Which can be further delineated into a variety of subgroups pa, okay? So general yung verbal, nonverbal, general yung LD, tapos magse-specify pa tayo kung dyslexia, dyscalculia, and kadalasan na may dyslexia, may dyscalculia din. Okay? Tapos may dysgraphia at may dyspraxia din. So some kids would have one or two, some would have all. So again, right? So you have to conduct an investigation and refer them to specialists. Ito yung mga specialists na pwedeng tumingin. Those who are certified to conduct a formal investigation and assessment and diagnosis are these specialists. So a neuropsychologist, a school psychologist, occupational therapist, speech and language therapist, a clinical psychologist who specializes in children with special needs, an educational psychologist, and developmental psychologist. Okay? So for counselors, it could be referred to them for assessment, but counselors now will have to refer to a specialist. Okay? So parang yung initial assessment, a school counselor could do that. Okay? An RGC could do that. Okay? And then referral to a specialist already. Okay? So, what can you do about learning disabilities? Okay? So, LD, again, take note, is a lifelong challenge. Okay? They won't go away. Okay? But they should not stop individuals from achieving their goals. There are a lot of famous individuals, both in the Philippines and abroad, who have diagnosed learning disability but are successful in life. Okay? But it has to be addressed. Why? Because most students who fall out of school and become juvenile delinquents always will have an LD. Okay? So they will hate schooling because the school cannot provide support for them. Okay, so kadalasan most of out of school youth or school or students who fell out of school and became juvenile delinquents, okay, more often than not has an undiagnosed learning disability. So take note, LD is not a disease. Okay? There is no single course of treatment or intervention that works for everyone. So it has to be tailor fit for every individual, for every student. Okay? Or every person. Okay? Again, it's not a disease. Hindi po siya nakakahawa. At hindi din siya sign of kahinaan. Ha? Take note, it should not stop you being an achiever. But without proper intervention or strategies, it could hinder or make your learning more difficult. Okay? So the first step is to overcome the challenge posed by LD. Okay? So you have to recognize that a problem exists. Okay? Then seek help from qualified professionals. Why am I saying this? Because there are adolescents who hide that they have the difficulty and they will not recognize that they have a difficulty. So acknowledge it and then seek help from qualified professionals. Okay? So that you could be evaluated properly. Okay? So because if you work with a trusted team, take note, it's a team of professionals, hindi lang isa. So teachers, guidance counselors, clinical psychologists, or behavioral specialists, yan. Okay? It's only possible for you to accommodate the needs of the student, provide services and support. Okay? So in LD adults, take note if there are adults who are listening that, ay, bumabalik yung nakaraan mo, parang may problem ako, no? It is never too late to identify and get help for your learning disability. Okay? But I must admit, it's more difficult to identify it in adults and adolescents. Why? Because at times they've already have their own style or natago na nila or meron na sila or may denial minsan. Okay? But finding about your LD can be a great relief for you who could not explain the reason for their struggles in the past. So minsan dyan. Okay? So if I may share my anecdote dito, I had a student before in Letran, okay? So she has been having difficulty since first year. Tapos na-label na siya na bobo ng mga classmates niya. Okay? Kasi ilang beses niya inuulit-ulit yung yung what you call that, yung mga courses. Na even, if I might admit, kahit ako noon, ganun din yung impression ko kasi nung panahon na yun, hindi pa ako very sensitive o sa pag-aaral ng LD. So meron din akong ganung impression na ang bobo naman ito. Bakit hindi makakuha? Tapos may problem na siya sa Math 101 pa lang. Okay? So to make the long story short, she was able naman to finish college in Letran, but for several years. And then after that, I saw her somewhere, nagtitake ng second course ng nursing. So at that time, rin ako, prejudice. Sabi ko, naku, good luck, gaano katagal mo na naman matatapos yung nursing mo. Dahil nga, kasi kanya, mahina siya intellectually, di ba? And then, surprisingly, after a few years, she got in touch with me in Facebook. And then, she's already in UK with the family. And then, she's a nurse already in UK. Tapos sabi niya, Sir Mark, could you refer, kasi ka-Facebook ko siya, yung pamangkin ko, kasi nga nagkakaroon siya ng problem in school para ma-assess. Okay? Kasi meron siyang dyslexia, sabi niyang ganon. Di sabi ko, sige, I'll refer you to a center. Tapos dun siya nagsabi, alam mo Sir Mark, meron din pala akong dyslexia. Dito ako sa UK na diagnose. Tapos doon, sobra akong I apologize to her. Sabi ko, I'm very, she experienced a lot of heartaches growing up in school. Identified as bobo or mahina when in fact undiagnosed dyslexic siya or person with dyslexia. So right there and there, I apologized to her. Sabi ko, I'm one of those, teachers na at your back was also labeling you as slow learner, bobo, ganyan. Sabi ko, I apologize. Okay? And that's why now, even in class, I'm very, very sensitive if I see students that might be having hints. Kasi na-miss out ko yon as a tertiary teacher kasi inisip ko hindi ko yan responsibilidad. At that time, I was not also adept at learning what LD is. Okay? I was just starting my practice then. So wala pa ako nung clinical eye. Okay? So but there again, testing for LD adults, but testing for LD adulthood is not uncommon. Okay? So seeking support and services could still be had. So again, my student was diagnosed with dyslexia when she's already an adult and in UK. Okay, so sana ma-identify natin. Kung na-miss out ng formative years ng elementary, high school, kung ma-catch natin sa tertiary level, baka pwede pa natin matulungan at ma-refer for assessment. Okay? So, part of you identifying if you have an LD then or to help an LD, a person with LD in their task is to know their learning style. So iba-iba kasi yung learning styles natin. Okay? Most of us are visual auditory learners. Okay? In classroom kasi, visual and auditory lang ginagamit natin. But for those with LD, again, they have a problem in their neurological functioning, how their brain is wired. So, as many pathways na pwede nating idaan. Kaya ang tinatawag multisensory. So, they might be kinesthetic learners. Hindi pa pala sila visual or auditory learners. Kinesthetic learners sila. They learn by doing. So, there's even a strategy for math that yung sa hagdanan nyo tuturuan ng addition or subtraction kasi may movement na kasama. So, hindi lang visual and auditory, may kinesthetic. Yung iba, to learn writing sa sand, yung tactile writing or writing, cloud writing, yan, it helps. Or yung letters, cursive letters sinusulat sa likod ng bata kasi may touch siya kasama. So, mas nagre-register sa brain nila. So you have to identify what kind of learner are you, and in class, as much as possible, multisensory sana. So kasama rin yung tactile. Kaya ngayon, I also encourage reading actual textbooks, kesa e-books. Kasi sa e-book, ang galaw ng daliri natin, ganyan lang, di ba? Samantalang sa textbook, mas merong effort kasi you hold the pages and you turn. Tapos hawak nyo, 3-dimensional din yung libro. So yun, kasi may mga kinesthetic learners sila. Mas gusto nila pag merong more on touch. Okay? So learning tips and tools for visual learners, use books, videos, computers, visual aids, and flashcards. Make detailed color-coded highlighted notes. For those with reading disability, sometimes they read better if they use highlighters, mas bumibilis. So make outlines, diagrams, and lists. Use drawings and illustrations. Kaya kapag tinuturo mo lang yung addition orally, hindi nila nagigets kasi kailangan sinusulat. Yung iba, hindi lang sinusulat, dapat sila rin nagsusulat. And then you break it down into parts. Okay? So for auditory learners naman, read notes or study materials aloud. So huwag kayong mahiya to read aloud. Yan kasi may sasabi, oy, at your age, dapat nagbabasa ka na silently. May mga auditory learners na pag nagbabasa sila, kailangan naririnig nila yung boses nila. Kaya lang, meron tayong stereotype na at a certain age, dapat they should already be reading silently. So, some students may have problems in reading, has a reading disability. They read better if they read aloud. So, siguro, na lang natin, wag masyadong malakas. But when they read it aloud, okay, they learn better kasi naririnig din nila yung binabasa nila. Okay? They memorize using word associations and verbal repetition. Study with other students. So some, they like yan, study groups kasi nga pag dinidiscuss yan. Okay? Mga audio books, audio tapes yan. It helps auditory learners. So habang nagbabasa sila, nakikinig din sila. So yung mga audiobooks, it helps auditory learners. Kasi habang nagbabasa, may narration din na naririnig. So for kinesthetic learners, ayan, kailangan sila hands-on. So kailangan, they want experiments, they want tactile, take field trips, yan. Gusto nila may mga activity days, like role-playing, small groups that they have frequent breaks kasi kailangan may movement. So mga games na enjoy nila, okay? Or study with music on the background, okay? So you have to understand that when a student has a learning disability who has been identified in class, we have to learn to accommodate and modify. So accommodations are different from modifications. So when we speak of accommodations, example, you extend the time, okay? Or you allow them to take notes. Modifications, you abbreviate the test. Okay? So between the two, mas ini-encourage namin ng accommodations kesa sa modifications. Kasi ang modifications, ina-abbreviate mo, for example, yung test, kaya naman niyang sumagot ng 100 items. Kaya lang, hindi niya kayang sagutin ang 100 items na may time limit kasi may difficulty siya nang nagbabasa. So you accommodate, extend mo yung time para sa kanya. Huwag mong i-modify. Because if you modify, you will make the 100 items into 50 items with the time allotment. So you're undermining the capability of the student. The student has the capability to answer 100 items. But the problem is, without the time element, binabaan, iniksian mo. Or, an accommodation could be after a written exam, they take it orally, oral exam, and then you average. That's a way of accommodation because some students could answer it orally when the question is read to them kasi nga hindi sila magbabasa. But when it's reading, it takes difficulty for them to absorb and understand what they read. So again, sino makakapagbigay ng accommodations or modifications? Specialist. Okay, so they already have a learning management style that or strategy that you could apply in class or at home. Okay, so again, students with LD often require special attention. Again, hindi to special privileges special attention, hindi to kasi minsan sinasabi, ay bakit ko bibigyan siya ng special attention? Diba dapat makisabay siya sa ibang estudyante. Hindi yun special na special treatment. Iba ang special attention sa special treatment. So special attention means you accommodate and modify because they have a disability. Okay? Their brain has difficulty. Okay? Or you give assisted technologies. Kung hirap sila sa writing, cursive, pwede silang allowed may laptop, help them encode, take down notes by encoding kasi hirap silang magsulat. Okay? So students with LD again are often as smart as their peers, but since they process information differently. So they need additional support. to compensate for their disability. So you're helping them compensate. You're giving them strategies. You're assisting them. Hindi po yun special treatment. Okay? So, okay, to end this, I'd like everybody to be aware that those with LD are protected by Republic Act 9442. Okay, or the Persons with Disability Act. So under Republic Act 9442, people of all ages, including LD, children and adults, are protected against discrimination and have the right to different forms of assistance in the classroom and the workplace. Okay, so the RA 9442 is an amendment of 7277. So embedded in RA 9442 are prohibitions and all acts that will result to vilification, including derogatory remarks against a person with disability. Okay? So it also encompasses incentives for caring and living with people with disabilities and penalties. Okay? So ito yung description ng PWD sa ating 9442. Okay? Ito yung mga types of disability na covered ng Philippine Registry for PWD. Nakita nyo doon under number 7, kasama ang learning. So kasama dyan yung LD. Okay? So you should read and understand RA 9442. I hope you could go through it, okay? Read and understand what RA 9442 is, okay? And educate people with disabilities, parents, and business establishments about the law. Okay, we have a law, kaya lang hindi nga siya implemented well. Okay? We have to be an advocate for persons with disabilities, most especially children with disabilities, because they don't have a means to advocate for themselves. So children with disabilities need adult supervision and adults to advocate for them. Okay? Document and file cases of violation. Filipinos, don't bring it to social media. Okay? Ang hilig natin magreklamo pero ayaw natin i-document yung reklamo natin. So document and file a case for violations for 9442. Okay? And there are lawyers and legal counsels naman, that would help us, if we have cases. So pro bono cases could be given. And let's just be patient and never give up. We have a long way ahead in understanding LD in the Philippines, and providing accommodation, modification and assistance to children, adults and adolescents with learning disabilities. So this is a number of the NCDA, the National Council on Disabilities Affairs, or their email. You could get in touch with them if you have complaints or violations against RA 9442. Okay, so maraming salamat. Thank you very much for listening. And I think we will entertain questions later. So thank you very much.
Okay po, thank you so much po, Doc Mark, for this very interesting topic we had this morning. So this is now our time to entertain questions from our viewers. So Doc Mark, first question po is from Miss Jocelyn Olarga.
Mm-hmm.
What will you do if the parent cannot accept that his child has a learning disability? The child is grade 3 but cannot read and write. His mother said he is only a late bloomer.
Okay. Common problem. Alam nyo, to be honest, we could only do so much. So we could try psychoeducating them. Pero ang challenge dyan kapag ayaw maniwala, di ba? Kasi nga meron pang stereotype. Yun, very common yun na encounter namin dyan sa Partners in Child Development and Progress. Naku, ganyan rin naman ang tatay niya dati, sasabihin ni Lola. Yun nga, mali yun. Mali yung konsepto na late bloomer. Bakit nga siya late bloomer? Ang tanong, bakit siya late bloomer? Okay? Maaring yun ang pwedeng maging argumento. Kaya lang, di ba? You cannot argue with the mother, pero pwede mo sabihin, yun nga, mami, o yun nga po, bakit po kaya siya late bloomer? May rason po kung bakit siya late bloomer. Okay? Tapos pag sinabi, ganyan naman din ako dati, pero naka-cope naman ako nang wala namang tulong. Iba yung anak na niya. So, maaring siya meron rin. You know, kadalasan yung mga ganyan, pag sinabing, ay, late bloomer, para yan rin yung nanay niya, tatay niya. Because LD could run in the family. It runs in the family. Okay? Now, okay, the thing is, siya maaring nakakope yung nanay or yung tatay without intervention because the level of learning disability is not that severe. Pero dun sa anak, mas severe. So, Jocelyn ang pangalan, no? Kiana, tama?
Yes po,
Okay.
Doc.
So
Yes.
Jocelyn, siguro try to talk to the mom once, twice, sige hanggang thrice. Tiyaga lang, pero kapag talagang stubborn yung mother or again, 'di ba? May denial, okay? Ayaw tanggapin kasi nga ang tingin nga sa learning disability disease siya, we have done our part. Siguro what you could do is to talk and then provide resources. Sabihin mo, Mami, baka pwedeng basahin nyo lang po ito or Google nyo po what is learning disability, maaring malinawan po kayo, ganyan. Yun. So, wag mong i-invalidate yung nararamdaman niya kasi baka ma-offend, di ba? So, do not directly invalidate the mother na mali po kayo, wala pong ganyan. Diba? Kasi baka mas lalong maging resistant, di ba? Sabihin mo lang, pag sinabi, ay, late bloomer po ba? Baka may rason po kung bakit siya late bloomer. Baka pwede nating ma-address yung cause ng pagiging late bloomer niya. So baka ang cause po ng pagiging late bloomer niya, meron po siyang learning disability. Tapos ito po ang maaari niyong basahin about learning disability para po malinawan po kayo kung ano yung LD. So yung ganun, start with that. Tapos pag hindi pa rin at meron pa ring difficulty yung bata, pwede kang magbalik uli. Baka pwede pong try natin ng strategies, yan ganyan. So ganun. Pero dapat meron rin tayong hangganan hanggang kailan tayo nga mag-offer ng help because we cannot control how they think, di ba? So, yun lang ang mahirap kapag willing ang teacher to help, willing ang educational system to help, but ang parents hindi. Unless it will boil down to a a very significant problem in schooling, edi principal na yung magpapatawag sa magulang at meron cases kami sa center ang nangyayari nire-require na nung school. Kapag very significant yung difficulty tapos talagang the child is really having problems in school tapos gusto talagang tumulong nung school, may mga schools na ang sinasabi parang they are recommending for the child to be considered for admissions again, parang ganon, to seek formal assessment and evaluation. So may mga schools na ganon. So nire-require na yung magulang kung in denial talaga at kita naman ng counselor tapos na meron na silang specialist na napa-observe tapos nakitaan. Okay? So pinapaano na sila. The parents are being already instructed by the school officials to have your child officially diagnosed, okay, or officially assessed so that we know that we could help your child kasi willing naman yung school magkaroon ng modifications, accommodations. Yun. So pwedeng yun yung nakikita ko na maaring a way para magising ang mga magulang sa katotohanan na kailangan ng tulong ng anak. Okay? So maari isa 'yon sa sa pwedeng paraan. Okay? Hingi na ng tulong sa school officials and see. Okay? Although kung wala namang policy, pwedeng ganun, encourage yung parents nung Although meron kaming mga schools ganon na nagpupunta sa center, tapos yun. Tapos kailangan may proof na they're going through therapy, ganyan, to help in the learning process in school. And parents naman, change their minds. And after that, they see na, ay oo nga, they eventually accept the fact na may problem nga yung anak nila sa learning.
Okay po, thank you so much, Doc Mark. Next question po is from Miss Minerva Lopez. Doc, advisable ba ang diagnosed student with ADHD, mild autism, and speech deficiency to be included sa regular class na may tendencing manakit tapos isasama sa STAR section para mas matutukan?
Okay. Number one, education for all. Again, RA 9442. They have the right to be in school. Okay? And lahat ngayon, we advocate already inclusivity. So, inclusive education. Okay? So, they have to learn with their peers. They should not be placed. Kaya hindi na rin encourage ngayon na masyado yung special school. Okay? Mainstreaming na ngayon. Okay? So, school should be ready now to accommodate. Okay? And accommodate students, okay, with ADHD, okay, autism, yan. Okay, so, but the thing is, of course, that's why school should prepare. Dapat meron silang system in school for accommodation. Okay? And they will work with the tapos yun, paulit lang na kasi baka manakit, o wag tayong, it's a stereotype. Hindi po lahat ng may ADHD at may autism nananakit. Okay? May rason kung bakit sila nanakit. Okay? So ano yung rason? So if these kids will be accommodated or included in a regular school, okay, yung tinatawag natin mainstreamed in a regular school or inclusive education, they have been included in regular schooling, then the school must actually also make sure that the child or the student is going through a behavior therapy. So then you will work with the with the therapist, with the behavior therapist. So kapag merong mga ganung mga actions in school, inside the classroom, ire-report yan, anecdotal, ire-report yan doon sa therapist so that the therapist will address on what is causing the negative behavior. But take note, hindi po lahat ng may ASD at hindi po lahat ng may ADHD nananakit. Okay? Ang rason kung bakit sila nananakit, may rason kung bakit sila nananakit. Hindi yan nananakit out of the blue lang. Na gusto lang nilang manakit. Maaring it's a form of reaction to something, a stressor in the environment. Okay? So, we cannot turn them away. Okay? Again, education for all. Hindi mo pwedeng sabihin na hindi mo tatanggapin yung bata kasi may ADHD siya or meron siyang autism. Okay? That violates RA 9442 and I think it violates another law for education for all. Okay? So the school should actually have means to accommodate. Okay, so that's why schools now should be ready already to accommodate students with special needs. In fact, a school should already have an office for this, like in abroad. In universities and colleges and schools abroad, they have already a particular office for student with providing accommodations, special needs for students with special needs. So yun. So dapat pong tanggapin and then create a program, work with the mental health specialist who is handling the student with ADHD, autism, and then yun. Ganun po. And then psychoeducate the whole school, psychoeducate the whole faculty. We have to be accommodating. You cannot discriminate them. Okay? It's in the law. You cannot vilify. You cannot even label them. May ADHD kasi yan. Autism kasi yan. So there are also a lot of things in terms of privacy, data privacy. Yun.
Okay po. Thank you po, Doc Mark. Then we have here our next question from Jessie Payawal. Question, are teachers considered as educational psychologists?
Hindi po. You have to finish bachelor's degree in psychology. You have to take your MA and specialize in the educational psychology, or even your PhD specializing in educational psychology. Hindi po automatic. Okay? So it's a specialization. So tignan niyo po, para rin siyang pagdodoktor, di ba? When we finish, you're a general practitioner, GP, di ba? And then you take a specialization. So hindi po pareho. So teachers are not educational psychologists. Teachers are teachers. So an educational psychologist is a psychologist who specializes, okay, in this. Even a school psychologist, specialization po siya. So kailangan ng pag-aaral. Okay? At dito sa Pilipinas, kailangan po ng lisensya. Okay, so you should be a licensed psychologist. So it means you have to have finished your master's degree, take the board exams, okay, for you to become a licensed psychologist. Okay, and then, ano lang yon, lumalabas pag licensed psychologist para kang general practitioner, di ba? Yung MD. And then you take your certification or specialization in educational psychology or school psychology. Yun.
Okay po, thank you po, Doc. The next question po is from Mr. Darren Adrian Ferrer. Are there any apps or online sources that you can recommend for them to learn online, not only for LD, but for other disabilities as well?
To be honest, we are all, including myself, di ba, we're all still adjusting to virtual learning, to online learning. So wala pa ako ngayon. I've come across specific apps, no, to assist those with LD for virtual or online learning. Pwede kayo mag-check, pero kasi this is all new to us, di ba? We're all adjusting. Okay? So pero maganda yung tanong niya kasi nga kung challenge na for students with LD yung sa face-to-face, okay, meron silang dagdag na challenge, di ba, sa distance or virtual learning. Pero maari naman yon, it helps kasi nga, di ba, yung auditory, yung visual, kung learners, kinesthetic, maaring pumapasok naman dyan. Pero yung particular na app, unfortunately, wala pa akong alam na application mismo application na to help students who have LD or experiencing challenges in virtual learning. Okay, but there are centers like Partners in Child Development and Progress. They have teletherapy, and I think they have online academic tutorials to assist because the center has clients with students who have learning disability or learning difficulty. So they have online tutorials and therapy centers, therapy strategies rather, to help parents and to help the actual students to learn virtually, okay, with their condition.
Okay po. Thank you po, Doc. And for our last question this morning, the question po is from Miss Eden Kakam. Is a shadow teacher required if some pupils are inclusive in a regular class?
Okay. I cannot say it's required. So it depends on the level of functioning and the needs of the child. Okay. So hindi lahat ng merong condition kailangan ng shadow teacher. So kadalasan ng shadow teaching, if I remember correctly, usually for those in the autism spectrum, okay? So those in the autism spectrum disorder, okay? And some with ADHD, if this ADHD is quite severe, okay? The shadow teacher is included in the intervention program. So ang makakapag-decide kung kailangan, I think we should not use the word required kasi pag required, ibig sabihin kailangan meron. So kung necessary, okay, it's necessary but it could be necessary but not required. It's the mental health specialist, okay, who is handling the child in coordination with the teacher. So if the teacher actually feedbacks to the mental health specialist, sa behavior therapist, yung observation niya sa school, okay, na nahihirapan yung bata, so pwede naman yung behavior therapist mag-classroom observation to observe the child in school. Tapos doon malalaman ay kailangan ng shadow teacher. So pag hindi naman kailangan, di sasabihin. So yun. So at best, teachers should feedback to the specialist handling the student, on their observations inside the class, and could also probably invite the specialist to do classroom observation unobtrusively, parang dadalaw to observe yung kanyang client in classroom. Tapos doon niya malalaman, kailangan ng shadow teacher. Okay? Now, the difficulty with identifying LD. LD is an invisible condition among the other conditions. Ang ADHD, autism, intellectual disability, they're more or less easier to identify inside the classroom kasi they have very, very significant overt behavioral manifestations. LDs kasi hindi eh. Okay? Kaya sasabihin, hindi naman siya mukhang may diferensya. Di ba? Yun yung padala sinasabi natin. It's an invisible among an invisible condition. So it heightens the difficulty identifying them in class because again, there are regular students who are having difficulty learning. So hindi naman din kailangan ng shadow teaching ang may LD unless very severe yung LD or yung LD meron ring ADHD. So again, maaring ang mag-recommend niyan yung teacher tapos pag-aaralan ng specialist at titignan kung necessary. Pero hindi siya required, yung shadow teaching.
Okay po. Thank you po, Doc Mark. Doc, last pahabol question.
Sige.
I think this question is essential for teachers to know po. From Mr. Roderick Alcantara, question po, sir. Assuming na meron pong student with behavioral problem, as a teacher, do we have a right to refer the student in the behavioral psychologist?
Okay. Yeah. Again, you have, I will change the term na. You have the responsibility. Okay? Kasi yung right medyo strong yata or hindi appropriate na term. If you have a student that you seem to notice a very significant emotional and behavioral problems, then it is your responsibility to refer them to the school counselor. Okay? And then for further assessment. And then the school counselor now could assess and refer it to a behavior therapist. So siguro ganun natin tignan na lang kung sa loob ng eskwelahan na para makita natin yung importansya po ng school counselor. Okay? Again, ang school counselors hindi sila discipline coordinator. Hindi natin pinadadala doon dahil gusto nating ang magsuheto or mag-discipline sa kanila ang school counselor. Hindi yun that's not the role of registered guidance counselor. The role is not to discipline. The role is to understand, mitigate, and assess. So if you think that a child is being disruptive in class or a student has an emotional problem, minsan ganyan sa UST merong lalapit sa akin, pero teacher kasi ako doon, di ba? So, ang role ko in classroom is a teacher. So, but it's my responsibility if I find a student who seem to be having emotional problems, I will refer them to visit the school counselor. Okay? Or, so it's either that or pwede rin naman, you could tell the student, kaya lang yung pag ang estudyante mismo sinabihan mo na I think you should seek behavior therapy intervention. Baka ma-throw off track na may judgment, di ba? Yung ganon. Or siguro during PTA, pwede nyo nang sabihin sa magulang. Pero I think the best is refer them to the school counselor para mas maimbestigahan at ma-explore ng school counselor kung talagang may emotional problem. So again, as a teacher, may not be your right, but it's your responsibility to refer if you find that they have a problem, it's very significant, and you are not in the position, of course, to become a counselor because you're a teacher inside the classroom, but you understand what they're going through, that they may be having emotional problems, refer to a school counselor. So that the school counselor could further assess and determine if there's a need for the student to be referred to a specialist outside the school already. So, magpe-parent, na yan, parent conference, kanya. Or during, di ba, parent-teacher, pwede naman doon. Kung hindi nyo madiretso sa school counselor, pwede naman yung parent during a parent-teacher consultation, pwede nyo doon sabihin, I notice your son or your daughter may be having emotional problems. How is it at home? Ganyan. And then I think it would be best that you could visit our school counselor para mas malaman anong pwede niyong gawin, what could you do right after, or yun na nga. Like when parents go to our center sa Partners in Child, no, diretso, madalas ako personally, I recommend go to your school counselor muna kasi one, that's free. Because when they go to the center, they'll have to pay. So, pag sinasabi ko kung kaya naman yan ng ma-attendan ng school counselor, it's part of their tuition fee, di ba? Bayad yan So it's a free service. So get the service of the school counselor. Pero pag gusto pa rin nila ng outside professional help, then it's okay naman. But I encourage them to go to their school counselor. So it's your responsibility to refer them to your school counselor if it's in school.
Okay po, Doc Mark, thank you so much for answering the queries of our viewers for this morning. For the other questions po on our comment box, we'll try to reach out to you through our messenger or through the comment box as well. So, Doc Mark, before we end the session, may we ask you for your final words or final reminders to our viewers this morning po?
Okay. We have to be very, very open-minded. Okay? So, learning disabilities, learning disorder is a real condition. Okay? Hindi po siya katamaran, hindi lang po siya lack of motivation. It's a real condition. So, we have to open our eyes, for the reality of the condition. But we also have to be careful not to simply diagnose anybody with learning difficulty as having a learning disability. Okay, so they have a unique set of characteristics. So you really have to have them formally assessed and evaluated. And once they have been diagnosed, it should not define them. Okay, so person first language tayo. These are students with learning disability or has a learning disability. Hindi siya hindi siya learning disability person. Okay, so it's a condition that could be managed, although if it's lifelong, but it could be managed, and with proper intervention, early intervention, they could live fruitful lives. And again, there are a lot of famous and successful individuals who has a learning disability. I think you all know Tom Cruise, is a person with dyslexia. So it's not a hindrance. And for all the disabilities, we have to be understanding, and have an open mind that these are conditions, and not all conditions are apparent or yung kita. We have what we call non-apparent disability. So do not simply judge a person when the person does not exhibit any disability at all. And of course, advocate for RA 9442 and fight for the privileges and the rights of persons with disabilities, more importantly, children with disabilities. So thank you very much. Let's all be inclusive inside the home, inside the classroom, inside the institution, inside our work. Let us be inclusive because we're all human beings who deserve to live happily and be given opportunities to succeed. So maraming salamat and have a very fruitful day for everybody. Stay safe. Stay at home. Thank you.
There we have it. On behalf of Vibal Group Incorporated, I would like to thank our speaker for this morning, Dr. Marc Eric Reyes, for spending your Wednesday morning with us. Thank you, sir, for this very eye-opening and insightful learning session that you had with us. It is our honor to have you today. And of course, to all our Kavibal viewers, all thanks to you for your continuous patronage to our daily learning sessions. Magkita-kita po tayo this afternoon sa atin pong YouTube live session, and of course, the rest of the week, meron pa rin po tayong continuous Facebook live learning sessions. Maraming salamat po. Magandang araw po sa ating lahat. Stay safe and God bless us all.
Thank you.